Hi everyone, and welcome to another Webaway Supply Road live streaming session. Today we are going to do a brief review of the environmental assessment TOR process, that's terms of reference process, and provide an update as to exactly where we are in that process. With me today is my usual co-host, Michael Fox. Mike, how are you today?
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. It has. No, it feels good. It feels good. It's always energizing, right? When you get a lot of done, and satisfying when you get that much done. So without any further ado, we're going to dive into a presentation that we're going to walk through. And as I said, in that presentation, we're going to sort of go over what we've gone over before about the EA process, but we really want to show you as community members where we sit currently in that process, and how much has been done and where we have to go next. So there's a wide range of experts that are involved in this, biologists and specialist biologists and engineers, different types of engineers, whether they're water engineers or civil engineers or geotechnical engineers. It's a lot of different people, and the activities are really diverse. There's physical, we'll get into it in more detail, but there's physical studies and biological studies as well. Okay, so we've got the presentation on the screen, and we're going to walk you through that. And I think this will be a nice review for everyone. I think many of you will have seen parts of this before, but I think so. This will be a nice refresher and set the table for the next phase, which is the EA process phase. So I'll pass that over to you, Mike.
Sure. Can you put the next slide? Yeah. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is two major phases. There's the terms of reference phase and the environmental assessment. So the terms of reference phase is the planning of the EA. Versus the doing the EA. So in the green, there's all kinds of effort just to create the terms of reference, and then there's more effort doing the actual implementing the work plan. And in that two major phases, what's really key is the engagement and consultation with Indigenous communities and stakeholders throughout the TOR and EA process. So the TOR will form the overall work plan and prepared in consultation with all the Indigenous communities and other stakeholders. Next slide, please. So Ontario has a piece of legislation, the Environmental Assessment Act, that lays out for all proponents, not just for us, but all proponents, what that process is, and there's a code of practice for the proponents to follow as well. This is just a flow chart that gives you kind of the roadmap, what the TOR process is. So again, it's not the EA, it's just the TOR. So the first thing in the red box, I guess on the top left, is called a notice of commencement of the TOR. And that notice of commencement phase of the TOR it's a public notice to everybody, stating the intention that they're going to embark on developing a draft TOR. So the notice commencement is one phase, and then you move towards drafting that draft TOR to the next milestone or public notice. So that next box you see on there, moving from left to right, I think, is a notice of draft TOR for review. So you have the notice commencement, public review process, where in public participation, where you can actually feed into the drafting, stating your views on things and what the project you like to see. And then we take that public input as part of the drafting of the terms of reference. And then the next milestone is the notice of the draft TOR for review. The operative word being for review, meaning that now you actually got, when I say you, I mean the public and the Indigenous communities actually have something to respond to.
Yes.
Right? So it's not just a concept or a notion, but you actually got a document that you can flip through and then provide your comments to that. So it's a draft, it's a notice commence a draft tour, and in that, it's another opportunity to engage with the draft tour. And then from there, we integrate all the comments and feedback into a notice of, into the next milestone is the notice of submission of the tour. So it's actually the final tour, if you like, that's going to be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And then it's sort of left into the minister's hands, assessing based on their criteria whether they're going to accept it with changes, or reject it. But if they do accept it, that is the final tour, even with conditions, then there'll be a notice of commencement of the EA. That's the final box. So that's sort of the roadmap on the tour process. So there's three major public notices during the tour process. If it's approved, then there's another notice. I think we have the next slide, please. I think we actually outline this in a better way. Yes. So these are the key notices. So these are public notices that the proponent's obligated to execute on, usually through ads, right? Through newspaper ads, through direct mailing in some cases for the Indigenous communities. The MECP has their own website. The proponent has to have their own website, so we have our own website. So we have to post those notices. And so here, these are the main public notices where you can actually participate in the process. So right now, we did our notice commencement last month about the sorry, oh, I'm getting confused there. The notice commencement way back in January 2019.
2019, yes.
Yeah, and we'll show a map. We'll show a kind of a little timeline about that. So, and then the draft tour. So we're actually at the draft tour. I think I'm trying to remember what date that was, but 2020? No, it's September 2018 or 19.
2019. Yes, that's right.
So the move from the notice and the drafting of the tour usually takes several months. And in this case, I think it was about 9 months from January to September. So from the notice of commencement to the notice of draft tour, it was 9 months. And then we went through another series of engagement program events throughout Ontario.
Yes.
And then the final tour. So that slide just gives you the public notices that we're obligated to do under the tour, and then the public notices that we have to do under the EA. So and not just public notices, but public participation and input required on those two major phases. So next slide, Don. I think this is you.
It is me, yes. And there we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the initial stages of the preparation of a tour. So what you would do, you're trying to sort of capture what is the project. So you would identify the activities involved in the project. You would describe where that project is going to occur. So the setting, the environmental setting. And that's not just natural environment, that's the entire environment. You would identify the potential effects of project activities. So you're trying to sort of anticipate what might happen, right, given a project like this, good and bad. And then as part of doing that, you would identify what you call mitigation measures. So measures to minimize or prevent impacts. That's what mitigate means. So after that, you would then, okay, once you've sort of captured and what the project's really about, you want to identify what studies would be required to assess those impacts. So that would be the next phase. Then the other part of it is preparing a consultation plan. So the consultation plan is an important piece. There's a consultation plan for the TOR, in terms of reference, and for the EA. And the one for the consultation plan for the TOR basically lays out what forms of consultation will occur during that TOR phase, because there may be a different approach between the TOR phase and the EA phase. And then finally, the TOR document is actually prepared for review and then submitted as a draft, as Mike was talking about. So, next slide, please. What are EA, or environmental assessment, terms of reference? Well, in a nutshell, terms of reference document is the work plan for the environmental assessment. What are we going to do during that? So it describes all the studies, all the activities. It has its own consultation plan, as I mentioned. The game plan for what's happening as we move forward through the environmental assessment, TOR phase. So it describes sort of what's going to be done in order to understand the impacts of the project on the environment. And the environment means, as I mentioned before, not just the natural environment. It also includes the cultural environment, the social environment, and the economic environment. And I want to emphasize that, your comments are on the TOR, the terms of reference, are really important because they help determine what's going to be done and to what detail different activities and studies are going to be done during the EA. This process is a public process which gives many opportunities for the public, Indigenous communities, other stakeholders, the opportunity to provide their comments and their input. And we have given many presentations, and we do that because we want your input. We want your input to help shape this document, to make sure that our environmental assessment is comprehensive and ensures that this project will be assessed properly, as it should be. So, baseline studies. This is a key component of an EA, and there's a purpose to these. These are defined in the terms of reference. They're not conducted during the terms of reference phase, they're conducted in the EA phase, but they're defined in the terms of reference phase. And when we say baseline, what we're talking about here is you have to understand what the condition of the environment is now, so you have a basis or something to compare to later on when you do other studies or monitoring. So that's how you identify potential impacts. You have to have a baseline, the way it is now, and then you have to do similar work later on to see if that project's actually had an impact. So when we do environmental monitoring, if we don't know what the current conditions are, then we don't really know if the project's having an effect on the environment because you haven't captured or described those current conditions. And we also don't know if some of the methods that we're using to control environmental impacts are working, or if we don't have something to compare it to. So that's why these baseline studies are so important. There's a lot of them. There's, as you will see in a minute, there are a lot of baseline studies covering a lot of different aspects of the environment. And when I say environment, it's more than just natural environment, as I said before. So, what would typical baseline studies be? There's a lot of them, and the ones that are on this slide here don't cover all of them, but there's a lot of them, as you can tell. So, for example, natural environment. You've got breeding birds, you've got marsh birds, you've got reptiles and amphibians, you've got aquatic habitat, vegetation, caribou, bats. There's a lot. Now, each of these studies is very typically done over a number of years during the environmental assessment, right? number of, usually multiple seasons and quite often multiple years. So there is an intense amount of work, field work that's done as part of these natural environment studies. And in our study area, in the Webequie Supply Road study area, this work is challenging because it involves helicopters, and so there's a lot of effort involved into it, in it, and a lot of planning as well, and a lot of we work with community members as much as we can to conduct these baseline studies. Now, we also do physical environment studies, and some of these might include, and we've conducted these already on some of them have been completed, some of them are sort of being conducted right now, but we did a LiDAR survey where we measured the elevation of the land from a plane flying over the study area, over the route, the preferred route for the all-season road. So we did that to be able to sort of identify in detail the elevation of the land and how it changes, to understand that. We have done geotechnical drilling. Now what that means is, geotechnical is understanding the subsurface, so below the ground, right? So if, for example, if you're planning to put a bridge in a particular location, you would do geotechnical drilling where that bridge is going to sit. So where the supports for the bridges are going to be, the general area, you would do geotechnical drilling to understand the soil underneath, so you know how to engineer the supports for that bridge. So we've undertaken that work in different locations. It also helps us design the road in different areas, because we need to understand what's underneath the surface in terms of soil in order to design the road in different ways. And then surface water, we do on a regular basis. We go to many different locations to take water samples, surface water samples, typically at where the planned crossing locations are for the road. And then there's groundwater or spring water, where we would drill wells so that we can look at how the groundwater levels change over seasons. And in our case, well, I think we'll be doing it over a couple of years, maybe 3 years. So there's a lot of work on the physical environment side, and then of course there's the socioeconomic and cultural environment side, which is a large and important amount of work, where we survey community members to understand more about them, about the economic conditions in the community, and then there's community health, understanding existing conditions, the health of community members, and understand better about what facilities are available to them now, and how the community members are viewing those facilities and whether they're sufficient. So that's a snapshot of the people side of things in the community. And then finally, there's the human health side, which is looking at what we call country foods, which would be the foods that are harvested by community members, the plants, the animals that are harvested by community members in their homeland. And then there's a community health survey, which tries to get a snapshot of the health of people, both physical and mental health of community members. And now I'm going to pass it over to Michael to basically paint a picture of where we are in this current TOR process.
Thanks, Don. So I was trying to simplify a journey, the engagement journey we've embarked on many moons ago. So in January 2019, so the beginning of 2019, we did the notice of commencement of the TOR, the terms of reference. So there was several months, or 9 months, for public input to the idea of drafting up terms of reference, and then we did a notice of commencement that same year, 2019, notice of submission of draft TOR. Sorry, I meant to say notice of submission of the draft TOR. So from January 2019, 2019, 9 months later, September 2019, we took public input to help draft the TOR. After that draft TOR, we went out to communities, we went out to tribal councils, we had a few open houses, off reserve sessions, trying to get input and submissions and feedback from the draft TOR. And then COVID happened in 2020. So we were all out on airplanes and automobiles, etc. All over 2019, the beginning of 2020 last year, up to where COVID happened, and we were just about to submit, believe it or not, submit the notice of the TOR, notice of submission of the TOR. So we just because of the feedback we got so far, like we got substantial amount of feedback from Indigenous communities and the public, that we felt confident that we had enough to submit a TOR. So our original plan notice of submission was going to be March 2020, but because of COVID, the two chiefs said let's delay the submission, and we did until September of last year. So we made the notice of submission of the TOR in September. And then we've been on a review process, and that's when we started intensifying our efforts with social media, and also as well as this live streaming, to get your further feedback on the some notices on the current final draft TOR that we submitted back in September. So fall, winter, now we're in June. So it's been almost 9 months since the final, the notice of submission of the TOR. Our efforts to engage has also changed. We've had a number of options that we've been given to Indigenous communities and other people, stakeholders, to review the TOR. So the TOR was 200 plus pages,
Yes.
And it's not that technical. It is technical for some people, but most of it, you would get an intuition of, especially the summary of the TOR, right?
Yes.
And we translated the summary, I believe.
That's right.
In the languages. I knew to get an intuition of what's being planned for the studies. Remember, it's just it's a work plan, and within that work plan is these proposed studies that they want to do in the environmental assessment. So, if there's something,
and each of those has their own work plan.
Yes,
associated with
study plans, they call them, right?
Yeah.
So since September of last year, it was a notice of submission of the TOR. We intensified our efforts to get further feedback last year. Recommenced this beginning of this year. Now we are June. We're now halfway through 2021. And remember, so it's almost 2.5 years since the notice of commencement of the TOR, the notice of submission of the draft TOR, and then the notice of submission of the TOR, and we're here. So we're just pointing that out that this has been a long journey. A lot of effort's been put into the current draft, I guess you want to call it, the TOR, and we really, to be. I think we've heard most concerns and issues. I would say.
I think we have, yeah.
Like there's nothing, because it's a plan, so you can only say so much about a plan, right?
That's right.
And so and that's what happens. Like the when you take on any type of exercise, you begin to start hearing things over and over, and it becomes sort of the central concerns around that. So I wanted to pass it off to Don on the range of engagement efforts that we've been using and offering to Indigenous communities specifically?
Yeah, we've had to reach into our toolbox, haven't we, Mike, with COVID, and try and come up with some creative ways of continuing to engage with communities, and so some of these include focus groups. So small groups, like 4 to 6 participants, where we have open discussions, and we've done some of these, but we're always open to. I guess our point really is these are options, right?
Yeah.
Some of these we've conducted, some of these we haven't yet. Many of them we have, but we're willing to engage with communities and with other stakeholders in a lot of different ways. So it could be focus groups, it could be community sessions, which we've had before. We can do them in person. Now many communities are getting satellite links, allowing for more opportunities for Zoom type meetings. So that's one way to conduct a community session. Drop-in sessions, at safe locations, where we can provide information for community members to look at. Online focus groups, we could do that. You could have it's basically like a regular focus group, but you're just doing it online. It could be chief and council, it could be community members or specific groups of community members, whether they're harvesters, other land users, elders, etc. The standard online presentations and meetings, the standard teleconferences, we can accommodate that. We can do open houses with live streaming. We've recently developed sort of a mock-up of a 3D open house, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah.
So, that's another option too. So, what we're saying here is there's a menu of engagement and consultation options available to you, and you can pick any one of them, and we'll accommodate that and make that happen so we can remain engaged with you. So I hope this has been a useful session. I think we tried to keep everyone up to date with where we are in this process. We're going to keep doing this. Our TOR process, as you said, has been a long and winding road, and that road continues, and we'll keep doing our best to keep you informed. And we're available again next week. We're going to be here next week for another streaming session, topic to be announced, but probably be TOR related, I would imagine. And
I think it's the themes.
Yes.
The Indigenous themes. So what we want to do is, as I mentioned, the issues that we've heard. So we reviewed all the topics and comments that's been given to us officially. Yeah. Like the official submissions for the review of the TOR, the Indigenous submissions, and we're taking the main themes out of that. We're going to discuss each one of them in the next series. So and again, I really want to emphasize what Don's saying. Business used to be done over the phone. So, it doesn't take much to fax a presentation to you guys on a specific aspect of the TOR and then have a conversation over the phone. We can do that on demand or planned, scheduled or otherwise, or we can do, and there's been Indigenous communities that has done chief and councils meetings. They also done virtual, that is, and they also done virtual community information sessions.
That's right.
So that was quite refreshing to see the use of technology that they at that point. So. Yeah, so next series will be, this month's series will be the main themes that came from the Indigenous submissions.
Which should be interesting, I think, for community members, because there's some definite themes coming from that. And so join us again next week between 5 and 5:30 for the streaming session. But don't forget, we actually have a radio call-in show on Wawate Radio, which is streamed on our website as well, too, between 1 and 2 p.m. next Wednesday, June 9th. So both events are next Wednesday. We'll be conducting these events every Wednesday going forward, 1 to 2 for the radio show and 5 to 5:30 for the streaming session. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
It's been a productive day, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Be rich.